Welcome to the Calm Analytics channel. This is Boris Reisengausen with you. Today is May 20th. Here are the main news stories at this moment. Putin rushed to Beijing for an audience with his boss. Remember, not long ago, Trump visited Xi Jinping and they picked out a chair for him so that he would look shorter than Xi. So they had a surprise prepared for Putin as well. I don't know whether it was done on purpose or by accident. Well, anyway, I watched the footage. The honor guard was arranged in such a way that Putin barely reached up to their shoulders. Now I'll show you this video. Pay attention to how the Botox gnome trudges along gloomily in his heels, only reaching up to the Chinese soldier's shoulders. They know all about the underground Conqueror complex in China. Well, I don't know if they'll put him in the same chair or not. The one Trump sat in, maybe they'll even raise it higher so his legs dangle in the air. But we'll find out about that soon. And so that Putin doesn't get bored reading the news in China, today Ukrainian drones paid a visit to a huge Russian oil refinery in Kstovo, hitting the atmospheric distillation unit. So yet another giant oil refinery has been shut down. And this refinery has been hit for the second time this week. This is Lukoil Nizhegorod Nefteorg Syntez, one of the largest oil refineries in Russia. It processes 17 million tons of oil per year. This refinery is important because it produces aviation fuel and diesel fuel, which are used to supply the Russian army. And the distance from the Ukrainian border to this refinery is 800 kilometers in a straight line. Well, drones don't always fly in a straight line, so it's a considerable distance. But that's not all. It turns out that the Moscow refinery suspended operations after the last drone attack. I'll quote the local authorities. This is important. You need to hear this. The strike on the night of May 17th caused only minor damage to the facility. However, the refinery's operations were suspended for safety reasons. Restarting it will take several days. That's something new. There's no damage at all, just minor damage. We just decided to suspend the operation of the huge Moscow refinery in Kapotnya, which, let me remind you, supplies 40% of the fuel for Moscow residents. We'll just stop it for a few days just like that. Well, just in case we want to do it this way. Of course we believe it. Of course we do, we believe it. Well, I'd also like to remind you that Ukrainian drones always finish off what hasn't been destroyed. So get ready, Moscow refinery, you might not have time to restart. So what do we have here? Since May 15th, the Ryazan refinery of Rosneft has stopped processing oil, and since May 17th, the Moscow refinery as well. So it turns out that the two largest oil refineries supplying Moscow and the Moscow region have suspended their operations. Wow, Ukrainian drones are doing a great job. And of course, even greater credit goes to their operators. Honor and praise to them. By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. You can do it right now. It's important for promoting the channel. And here we are fighting against Putin's propaganda. Let's do it together, so make sure to subscribe. And now some shocking numbers for Putin. The underground heel will be very upset. 10 of Russia's largest oil facilities have been attacked in the first 20 days of May, just since the beginning of this month. 10 of the largest oil facilities. At the moment, the Moscow oil refinery, Ryazan, Perm, Kirishi, part of the capacities of the Kubyshev oil refinery in Samara have been shut down or partially disabled, and the Tuapse oil refinery, which burned for a week, has been idle with no timeline for restoration. And in May, facilities in Primorsk and Yaroslavl were also temporarily shut down. These will definitely be finished off in the coming days. Linear production dispatch centers and oil pumping stations were also attacked. These are linear production dispatch centers and oil pumping stations. So, just in the last 2 days, 7 oil pumping stations and 1 linear production dispatch center in the Nizhny Novgorod, Ryazan, and Yaroslavl regions of Russia have come under attack. Now that's a real harvest. And one more piece of news. Forgive me, I never thought I would quote the former head of Roscosmos, Rogozin, but here's what he wrote on his Telegram channel after the massive attack on Moscow. He was writing about Ukrainian drones. Do you think there will be fewer of them? No, their number will only grow. The routes and tactics of their use will continue to improve. They will probe for gaps and vulnerabilities in our defenses, overloading the country's production and technical capabilities with their foam drones, each of which costs several million rubles to produce anti-aircraft guided missiles. They will concentrate strikes on one or several regions, pre-selecting their target objects with the help of satellite reconnaissance and ground agents, and ultimately deliver complex attacks using long-range drones, cruise missiles, and ballistic weapons, as well as FPV drones, which will be delivered in advance by any means necessary to the attack site by sabotage and reconnaissance groups. This is what, according to Rogozin, will happen. And in the rear regions, strikes will be carried out using autonomous loitering munitions, whose purpose is to terrorize highways, disrupting all logistics and the movement of military and heavy vehicles along them, Rogozin concluded. Honestly, I don't see any downsides. So Rogozin has painted an excellent future for Russians, and it's the near future at that. By the way, Rogozin has personal reasons not to like Ukraine and Ukrainians, so it's hard to suspect him of being biased. Let me remind you, he once went to the front for an inspection and was wounded right in the backside. That's just a fact from Rogozin's life. Another interesting point, the attack on Moscow has revealed a much more serious problem for Putin. The Baldy is not just losing the war at the front, he is losing it on a much more important battlefield, in the mind of the average Russian citizen. The entire Putin contract with society was not built on ideology. There is no ideology there. Not even on fear. Well, partially on fear, but that's not the main thing. It was built on a simple deal. You give me politics, and I give you peace and quiet. Not freedom, not dignity, not a future, just peace, the ability not to think, not to choose, not to be responsible. That's it. That's how it is. This is exactly what Putin has been selling for 25 years, and this is exactly what millions of Russians have been buying. Ukrainian drones over Moscow simply tear up this contract. This is a public refutation of the most fundamental promise of the Botox Medusa. And what's crucial is that this refutation can't be somehow airbrushed by propaganda or by putting Solovyov on 10 more times, because it's being heard and seen by Muscovites themselves. Not only Muscovites, but also residents of Perm, Tuapse, and Yaroslavl. This is where the existential trap lies, one from which probably Putin has no way out. To acknowledge the scale of the threat, to say, yes, they are reaching Moscow, yes, we're already catching them right here, just 10 kilometers from the Kremlin. To admit the scale of the threat means to admit one's own failure as a guarantor for Russians. Stay silent? Well, that would mean leaving citizens alone with this reality. On TV, there's Solovyov. Everything's fine, what are you talking about? Over there, we'll handle it soon, we'll just raise an eyebrow, and so on. So, to stay silent is to leave Russians alone with this reality, which they are already physically experiencing. Tighten the repression? Well, that would mean confirming that the authorities fear their own people even more than an external enemy. There is no way out of this situation. History, by the way, knows this scenario. It has seen it many times. Regimes do not collapse when people stop loving or fearing them. They collapse when people stop believing in them as a force. Fear of the authorities, of Putin, of his repressions, works only as long as the authorities seem scarier and stronger than other fears. When a drone falls just a few blocks from your home, the balance of those fears changes. That's why Putin spent years building the image of an unshakable master, and Ukraine methodically, blow after blow, time after time, is dismantling this image not on television but in the real sky over real Russian cities. And this perhaps is probably the most terrifying and precise blow for the 1.5-meter tall man in heels. Meanwhile, Ukraine and Ukrainians are showing the whole world that it is possible and necessary to fight the enemy, even if he greatly outnumbers you in manpower and equipment. And in every episode, we have an important fundraiser for the Defense Forces of Ukraine. Today, we are starting a fundraiser for the Drone Systems Battalion of the 61st Separate Mechanized Brigade. We are raising funds for drone repeaters, for FPVs, for NRCs, for ground robotic systems, so that FPVs can fly farther and strike more accurately. Right now, the fighters are stationed in one of the hottest areas near Huliaipol, where they have already stopped more than one Russian assault and are putting up a very tough resistance against the occupiers. The soldiers have recorded an address for you. Please take a look.
Бажаємо міцного козацького, непереможні українці. Ми 61-й МБР, батальйон безпілотних систем, боронимо нашу землю на Запорізькому напрямі. Звертаємось до Бориса Тизенгаузена і його аудиторії з проханням допомогти зібрати нам кошти на ретранслятори, які забезпечують нам та нашим пташкам та наземним роботизованим комплексам постійний зв'язок. Тож величезне прохання до всіх небайдужих долучитись до нашої потреби, а ми будемо і надалі відбивати у ворога бажання лізти на нашу землю. Слава Україні! Героям слава! І смерть ворогам! І разом до перемоги! Дякуємо!
Let's help the soldiers of the 61st Brigade. The link to donate is in the description of this video. There are options for Mono, Private, and PayPal for those who want to help from abroad. In every episode, I thank you personally for helping Ukraine and supporting our warriors. Thank you so much. And there's always a QR code in the corner, which also leads to the donation page in case you're watching on another channel. You know, I talk to the soldiers. They're just like that, really. And, you know, they're real salt of the earth, real tough guys. Let's help them. Our support is very much needed right now. Right now. And also, friends, I have some good news for you. Not long ago, I received a letter of gratitude for you from the 412th Separate Nemesis Unmanned Systems Brigade. A thank you to the viewers of Boris Tizengausen's channel. Here it is. And taking this opportunity from all of us, I know they're watching, I want to pass this on. The warmest words to the command of the 412th Nemesis Unmanned Systems Brigade and to the soldiers of this brigade, and a huge thank you to them. This letter of gratitude will take a worthy place on our wall, which will soon be expanded. You'll definitely see it. Well, unfortunately, that's how it goes sometimes. On our program, it often happens that we have to go from talking about real heroes to all sorts of petty scumbags like Peskov. So, about Peskov. They let him out of the ward again, and he made the following statement. Against the backdrop of Kyiv's aggressive statements, Russia will continue the special military operation until victory, Peskov stated. You can keep going until Ukraine's victory. In my opinion, even the Russians themselves no longer believe in any kind of victory. And here's another question. What do they even mean by victory now? If you remember at the very beginning, Solovyov said, we'll just raise an eyebrow and it'll be over in 3 days. They probably thought they'd already be raising their flag somewhere over the Verkhovna Rada or the president's office. Now, what do they call a victory? Quietly sneaking out of Ukraine after leaving another million of their ghouls here? Or what else do they call a victory? Completely cutting off the internet for Russians? So that no one, God forbid, would see or hear about this shameful defeat. You know, right after that news, after Peskov's boastful statement, I came across another piece of news. I think that these two news stories are very, very much connected. 10 children were injured when a balcony collapsed at a school in occupied Sevastopol. In Sevastopol, where I was born, a balcony collapsed. There are children, school children, who were admitted to the hospital in serious condition. And why? Why are these two news stories connected? Because all the money has gone to the war. With each passing month, the budget deficit in Russia will only continue to grow. Recently, there have been several incidents in the Russian Federation where, in schools, a wall simply collapsed on students, a ceiling caved in, or a balcony fell. And all of this is simply due to age and dilapidation. Because all the money is going to the war. Putin is throwing everything into the furnace of war. Soon schools will just start collapsing. It's fine, we'll endure. By the way, let me remind you, it was in Crimea. It was Medvedev who once said his famous phrase, "There is no money, but you hang in there, all the best to you." And the pensioner who once asked Medvedev when pensions would finally be indexed, the one to whom Medvedev replied, "There is no money, but you hang in there." So that pensioner died without ever receiving the promised increase. There was news about this recently. That's the kind of stability we have. There's no money to repair schools, no money for dams. There's no money, and when the dams break and Russians die, there's still no money. But Putin, just now, a thought came to my mind. Putin, he's like the chief disposer of Russians. In other words, look, he disposes of Russians in war and takes the money. From school repairs, from dam repairs, he does it there too. When a dam breaks, he kills Russians that way too. In other words, he's destroying a record number of Russians on all fronts. Maybe that's his mission? Interesting. And now Russian bloggers have been hit by trouble from where they least expected it. Good news, wonderful news. TikTok has blocked more than 30 accounts and over 300 videos advertising the Alabuga Polytech College where drones are produced. The day before, TikTok banned a huge number of videos, and a bunch of TikTokers who advertised this Alabuga were blocked, and the blocked accounts had millions of followers. Russian bloggers whose accounts were blocked are already making videos. They're crying, promising never to do it again. They say it was a mistake, but unfortunately, they're making these videos not on TikTok because they're blocked on TikTok. You really have to be utterly depraved to advertise and encourage this among young people. To go and assemble Russian killer drones that are used to kill Ukrainians. You got what you deserved, you bastards. And a little more about Russian school children. Do you know what happened there? They were forbidden to dance to music by foreign artists. It's not allowed to represent anything non-Western, no. The school children started to protest, saying they had rehearsed to one kind of music, but now they're being told they have to dance to a patriotic Russian song. Songs by Sting, Whitney Houston, and basically all the usual music played at school graduation dances have been banned. So in their complaints, the graduates said that school administrations are even banning instrumental music, even though their routines with this music had been rehearsed long ago. At one of the schools in Nizhny Novgorod, only one song was approved, Lyubez, From the Volga to the Yenisei. Yes, other songs were banned. Listen, this is just Putin barreling back to that cozy Gulag-era Soviet Union on his rusty little trolley. As the saying goes, today he plays jazz, tomorrow he'll sell out the motherland. That's exactly what this is about. And I also noticed that somehow they've stashed the Russian singer Shaman away somewhere. Did you notice that? That disgusting sniveling face used to pop up everywhere all the time. Do you know why he got banned? After he licked the ice on Lake Baikal on camera. Probably one of the most revolting sights. I came across a clip of it. It was just absolutely disgusting. The most fanatical Putin supporters all have something wrong with their heads. I think you've all noticed that. Chicharina and Duzhev, they're constantly on some kind of substances. Shaman apparently is the same way. Well, probably because no one in their right mind would support Putin. So I decided to see how Russian media are covering Putin's visit to China. These news reports seemed very strange to me. I mean, it's all about agreements, negotiations, all that, 40 crucial documents signed, but without any details. Everything is very important, China and Russia. Brothers forever, all that stuff, all that. But then I go to the Russian RBC site and read this news item. In Beijing, Putin met informally with a 36-year-old Chinese engineer named Peng Pai, whom he met a quarter of a century ago, according to TASS. And Peng Pai gave Putin a porcelain tea set as a gift. I'm thinking, who is this informal, some 36-year-old engineer? What kind of news is this? It turns out, fasten your seatbelts. Do you know who this engineer is and why Putin met with him? In July 2000, when Putin visited China for the first time as president, 9-year-old Peng Pai happened to be in Beihai Park. So the boy happily waved at the bald man, and Putin, lifting the child down from the stone railing, kissed him on the forehead and took a photo together. I'm reading this news from RBC. Here's this excerpt from the RBC News. After finishing school, Peng Pai went to Moscow, where he learned Russian, and in 2013 graduated from the Moscow Automobile and Road Institute. He then returned to his homeland and got a job as an engineer. And now Putin met with him. I hope that this time, in an informal setting, he didn't kiss Putin. But in general, Putin has a very strange tendency to kiss other people's children, and of completely different nationalities at that. Remember when Putin, in 2006 I think it was, unexpectedly, he approached an unfamiliar boy and kissed him on the stomach. So, among our viewers, we have 508,000 subscribers on our main channel, among the viewers of this channel. Do any of you ever feel the urge to walk up to someone else's child on the street, lift up his t-shirt and kiss him on the stomach? Are there any of you like that here? By the way, journalists actually found out what happened to that boy. As it turns out, now he's preparing cannon fodder for Putin to send off to war against Ukraine. The boy whom Putin kissed on the stomach now works at a military training center at the Ryazan Radio Engineering University. He teaches there, preparing cannon fodder. Apparently, the kiss from the balding ghoul didn't go without consequences. Well, friends, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel. I ask you very much, let's help our fighters from the 61st Brigade. The link to donate is in the description of this video. Have a peaceful day, everyone, and glory to Ukraine.